Yeah. No, TC, it's good to have you on, man. We've been messaging back and forth for a while now, and
Yeah.
you reached out to me about your book, Made in Taiwan, and I started looking a little deeper into it, and I was like, man, I don't even know. I can't even fathom some of the things that you experienced during your early transition, a quick transition into adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of it wasn't the smartest things I ever did in my life. But,
Yeah.
you're young and, you're not hurting anybody. You don't really think beyond that much, like no consequences. Hey, it's just me, right? Yeah. Interesting
Yeah.
times.
Well, TC, how did you start from the beginning on how you even ended up over there? Because I know I saw where you were a military police officer,
Yeah.
and I don't even know exactly what a military police officer does, but just talk about how you even got into that role and then ended up in Taiwan and just kind of what some of the experiences were.
Yeah, well, I was when I graduated from high school would have been 67. And the Vietnam War was really starting to cook then, and guys my age were I think when I graduated, I'm not remembering if the draft was right then. It might have
Yeah.
just started or it might have started soon after. That's a long time ago, but I worked for a while and I was accepted at Ohio State to start. I don't know, I wasn't ready to go to school. And I
Yeah.
played in a band back in those days. There was a famous national band called the Tijuana Brass Band. And I was in a band here in Columbus, Ohio called the Buckeye Brass. And
Yeah.
two of our horn players, one guy was good enough. He got in the First Army Band in Washington, and another guy
Wow.
went in another Army band. So I thought, I don't want to go to school now. I'll just join and get in a band, right? And so I eventually, I tried the Navy and they had a bunch of tests that I didn't do well at. And then Air Force guy just basically said, "Oh yeah, go to basic, and at the end of basic, they'll ask you what you want to do, and you tell them you want to be in the band." And of course, I'm like, that isn't quite how it works. I had three choices: air traffic control, and my eyesight isn't good, so that was out. Cook, and after doing KP and basic training, no interest, and then cop. So that's how I
Yeah.
became a cop. In the Air Force, they call them security police. They had
Mhm.
actually changed it from air police like the year before I joined because they wanted to show both sides of what they do. One is law enforcement, the other is
Yeah.
guarding airplanes and bases and stuff like that. So
Okay.
my first few months in Taiwan, I got shipped to Taiwan after basic and tech school, and I didn't even know where Taiwan was, to be honest. And I wasn't thrilled, but I went with some of the guys I was in tech school. And so we got there in August 68, and I walked around airplanes for 3 months, and I must have done something right because they called me in and said, we're going to take you to, we were going to move you down to town patrol, which was a great duty because I would live off base, I would work off base, and there was a big bar strip down there that everybody went to called the Dirty Dozen. Actually, there's a lot more in the dozen. So that's kind of what I did. I got on the law enforcement side, and it was pretty exciting. And instead of just going down there to hang, that was my workplace really. And of course, we covered everything. Some guys live downtown; they'd have a burglary or always a lot of accidents involving GIs and Chinese. And we work with Chinese police, local and military. So there was usually two of us, two Americans, and then two Chinese police. And that's what we did. There was a lot of action, to say the
Yeah.
least.
So truly one of those stories where you don't really know what you want to do at that age. You know this is an option, so you just jump in, and next thing you know, you're being shipped out of the country.
Yep, yep. And and I was homesick for like 6 months, but then I kind of got used to it. It's a beautiful country, and the people are super friendly. And, I like the job. I like the people I work with. We were kind of all brothers in arms, if you will, and of course I fell in love, and that helped everything. So, yeah, after 6 months, I was feeling pretty good about where I was. And
Yeah.
then, of
What
course, I
Wh
stayed.
what did your just kind of going through the experience of it all, what did your family think of your decision? Or because again, we don't hear about the draft really anymore, about that really being a serious thing that young men have to go through, at least not I haven't had to experience that.
That's
But what
good.
was that ex Yeah, and I again, that's another one of those things I'm like, wow, that would be, I can't really imagine what that would be like to all of a sudden hear my name called and I gotta go,
Yeah.
do something I'm not really thinking about. But what was just the whole experience like for you to, I don't know, decide to do that? And what was your family? What was that like? How did they feel about it all?
Yeah, well, like I said, I kind of did it, being hopeful that I could, I was going to major in music in
Uh,
college, and I thought, all right, well, I'll just get in a military band, and that'll keep me going. But it didn't work out that way. But I just wasn't ready to go to school, and I knew if I didn't go to school, I mean, I had a job, but I knew I'd be drafted. And if you were drafted in those days, you went to one place, the army, and then you went to another place, Vietnam. I mean, that's a given for most guys. So guys my age, you felt the pressure. A lot of guys tried to get out of it. A lot of guys just said, "Okay, draft me," and people had different ideas about what they wanted to do. My family was not happy, of course. The other, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, which is home to the Ohio State Buckeyes, which is
yeah.
like a cult here in Columbus. And
Oh yeah.
my
I
mom
got
and
lots of
dad,
friends that are Buckeye
oh
fans,
yeah,
TC.
oh yeah, yeah, we
The
weren't too
trash
happy
talk is
about
year round.
yeah, we weren't too happy about March Madness recently, but that's the way it goes. But anyway, so my mom and dad, they never went to the university, but they went to all the football games for like, my mom until she died, almost 60 years she went. So they were excited about seeing me in the marching band, So I know that had to be a big they never said that to me, but I know it had to be a big disappointment. I thought about that much later in life, really, I be honest with you, I guess I was focused on what I felt I had to do and wanted to do. And
Yeah.
so, I had some pretty good parents and they they got through it okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sure a lot of people did, and again, it's just kind of one of those experiences of the times and what's going on, kind of
Yeah.
something you just have to accept, and once you make that decision, you're all in, you can't really flip-flop
You
back and
can't say,
forth.
"Oh, I changed my mind." Trust me, that
Yeah,
first night
yeah,
in basic, when they kicked in the door about 5 a.m. after we'd had about 3 hours sleep, I was ready to say, "I want to go home. I made a mistake."
yeah, but you're stuck now.
Oh yeah, you are stuck now. Yeah, the fun
Yeah.
had just
Well,
begun.
yeah. Well, talk about some of you're over there now, so you enroll, you're sent overseas. Talk about some of the stories and some of the experiences. Don't give everything away, but talk about some of the stuff you went through and just some of the things that just got experienced, into and what did all that
Oh
look like?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I found the side of when you become a cop, now I'm going to talk about when I was on town patrol because otherwise we're just walking around airplanes all night, all day, and that's an important job, but thankfully not too much exciting ever happened there. But, down on town patrol, part of our job was patrolling the bars like a couple of times a night, walking through, looking for drunk guys, passed out guys. Sometimes you'd find a passed out guy in the bathroom, sometimes there'd be trouble and you'd have to go down there. And so there was all that. And, I just remember when I first started doing it, I was real nervous because, when four cops walk into a bar, like usually it kind of quiets down and, nobody's really thrilled to see you except maybe the management. And so you're kind of the center of attention for a while, which I got used to eventually, and it didn't bother me. But at first, it was like very weird, And but you never know what would happen. We would cover everything from bar fights to guys getting in trouble. Like one time, a bunch of guys went in a bar and they didn't, they were mad because of something happened the night before, and they would sit there and they didn't want to leave, And so you have to go deal with that kind of stuff. You guys, you have a lot of guys that want to kick your butt, and I think I wrote in a book, like, it was funny because I guess this is not always, but a lot of times the bigger guys would maybe listen to you, but the little dudes, man, they're ready to take you on,
You
and,
got something to prove.
I wrote about one incident in when we had that's in Taiwan is in Typhoon Alley, it's called. And when I was there all that time, probably had at least 4 or 5 typhoons come through, sometimes tail end. But we had to clear the bars out. And this one guy, we walked in and he said, "Hey man, you got to go." No, I'm not going. And so then he just launched off and we're trying to I mean, girls are screaming, glasses are breaking, we're crashing into tables.
Well, and
So
you're TC, you're what, 18, 19,
yeah, yeah, I got
20
there at
at this
18.
point?
Yeah, I was 19 on town patrol. Yeah, I turned 19. just a kid.
Where yeah, well, and I'm assuming, a lot of people in these bars are probably the same age, but there's
Oh
probably
yeah.
some older guys too,
Yeah.
and you're having to be the enforcer
Yeah.
and leader at that point. I can imagine that's just a very odd feeling. And you kind of mentioned it as you kind of started. You're probably like, man, how do I enforce the rules here?
Right.
What? Yeah, I'm sure that was a little unique.
Oh yeah, yeah, and and you never know what somebody's gonna do, too, and luckily, we all like there was usually two of us most times. Now, once in a while, you'd be by yourself, but you still have the Chinese cops. Although they, depending on the cop, they wouldn't necessarily get in. Some would, help you out, and some were a little more standoffish. But yeah, and but if it's we call older guys usually they're lifers. They were going to do 20, so and then they like to party too, and they weren't always doing the right thing either. So yeah, but you're the law, right? And you represent that, and they know that for the most part. But yeah, it was. You have a lot of responsibility now. If you went through my book, you will see I kind of walked the dark side a few times. That people that did
I was gonna
stuff that
ask
I
you
did,
that,
we'd
I mean
arrest.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I mean, you obviously have some off time as well, and you're probably looking for stuff to do, and you're a young man. Everyone's you don't have a ton to go do except
Yeah.
hang out and do what everyone else is doing, and you talk a lot about that, side of it. Did you ever have to I don't know, did you ever get arrested by one of your peers
No,
for
no, usually my peers were with me doing the same stuff
Yeah,
I was
okay.
doing. Now don't get me wrong, we weren't too crazy, but just drunk and disorderly, right? I mean, you could say we were drunk and disorderly at times, but it helped being the law. I know that's not really the right thing to do. That's not being a
But
good
yeah,
cop, but
it is what
I'm
it
being
is.
honest. One thing I like about this book that everybody that's reviewed it has given it thumbs up for honesty, and which I really tried to do. And that's what part of the hesitation at writing it, because I knew I wasn't going to shield stuff that I wanted people I've been a journalist for a long time and retired now, of course, but over the years, I would tell people different stories that are in that book. And they say, why don't you write about that? And I couldn't quite get the right venue. And then my wife told me, so why don't you write a memoir? I started researching it, and that was perfect, and it took me a
Yeah.
couple of years to write. And I actually had an agent in Washington, D.C. that liked it well enough that she tried to pitch it, but nobody knows who I am. So my memoir, like, why do people, they want to make money, the publication houses.
Yeah. How many TCM specifically, I'm just curious about like the military police, because again, I don't know a lot about it. How many of you were there? Like, you said two was usually on shift, but
Mhm.
how often were you working? How many in total were there with you? Was there 20 police officers on rotation? Just like a
No, not that
handful?
many. More like a dozen Americans. And then, of course, like I said, there would be Chinese military cops and civilian cops too. So yeah, there was about a dozen. And it was considered primo duty because you got paid more for living off base, and we lived in a hostel. But the economy there is just you can live like a king, really. And so a lot of guys had a separate apartment, and but yeah, it was 12 guys. And again, I don't. I guess I tried to. I was spit shined. I mean, I did what they wanted. I suppose maybe that's why I got chosen. I mean, I was shocked when they picked me. I had no idea. I was aware of town patrol, but I
Yeah.
I don't remember that I had asked to be on it or anything. I don't recall that I did. So it was primo.
Were there times when you felt, I mean, just straight up, did you feel scared for your life? With what was going on, were there moments where things got a little dicey and you were like, I don't
Oh
like
yeah.
this?
Yeah, you kinda learn, I mean, yeah, there were like I said, there were plenty of times people are trying to clean your clock, and you're doing your best. I'm not a big guy, and, like, I remember when my buddy Ulysses Bryant he was on the Boston Armed Forces Police, and he came to Taiwan, and he was my partner, and I write about this. There's, like, we get called to this gigantic brawl going on outside of the, front of the bar, and so I start to go in there, and he grabs me, and he goes, "Hey, no, we're not going to go in there. We're going to let them tire out. When they throw somebody out, we'll grab that guy. Let them wear themselves out," which is very
Strategy.
wise. That was very wise. So, you learn over time. You learn over time. You have
Yeah.
to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. But just in general with what was going on over there at the time with the war and everything, I mean, were there times outside of just your duty of kind of keeping the peace where you were at, where you felt in danger, or were you thankfully not so because of your role, you weren't having to go be in the the front lines of some of the stuff going on, but like just your whole experience, what was
Yeah.
that like?
Yeah, I'm trying to get you a little more light here. Yeah, I think the one I mentioned a little bit ago, the fact that there was a lot of racial problems at that time. Frankly,
Mhm.
like there was over here. And the time I mentioned like going in the bar and all these guys were doing a sit down. And
Yeah.
that was the day I was by myself, and I mean, I had the Chinese cops, but these guys were, they weren't doing anything. They weren't doing anything. They weren't buying anything. They weren't causing trouble. But Mama San wanted them out of there or start buying stuff. They were doing it because a buddy of theirs had either been slow walked or not served the night before. So there's okay, well, we'll show you. And so I knew, I mean, it was me and a whole bar full of dudes. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get out of this? And so I be honest with you, I wrote about it and I just like, I was so sick of the racial stuff, I mean, I just hate that stuff. And, it's unfortunately we still have it, but so anyway, I just went out of my mind, I guess. At one point, I just took my hat off, threw it down on the jukebox and said, have at it, boys. I know I can't stop you. You'll have to pay down the road. And somehow whatever I said got through to them and they didn't do anything. And then they eventually left. So I was
Yeah.
nervous then. I was pretty
Yeah.
nervous. So
Yeah. No, and I'm just sitting here, TC, trying to put myself in your lens and see things on what you saw and what you experienced. And again, I don't think there's anything I can do to truly experience it. I'm so glad you wrote your book though, because
you
it
don't
does give
want to.
more insight. I mean, to all these things that went on, because you were over there for what, 5 years, 18 to
Yeah, so
23.
I got there in August '68, and in February '70 I went to Vietnam, and because I took what they called a short reenlistment at the end of Vietnam, I got out of Vietnam a couple months earlier, but then I had 4 more years in the service. And I don't want to give it away, but I did that for a particular reason that's at the beginning of the book, and that I wanted to go back to Taiwan. We can say it had to do with a young lady, and I was intent
Yeah, I
on
didn't
doing
want to give
that.
it away either.
No, no, that's right. So anyway, but so I was in Vietnam for about 7 months, 8 months, something like that, and which was enough. That was fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was a little nervous there too. We got hit with rockets and mortars a few times. I was riding on some of these missions at night that I didn't really have to do, and probably would have got in trouble if my base would, because I worked in an off base, underground tactical operations center with Army guys, Army of Vietnam, popular militia, that kind of. And so, the guys, the Army guys didn't care. They just like, you want to fly on a chopper, go for it. We don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
It was
Well, you
exciting.
seem to yeah, no, well, you seem to have a very, like, positive appreciation for what you got to experience, which but I'm gonna ask the question anyway of, are there any regrets that you sometimes have of making that decision, or do you appreciate everything you got to experience, and what are some things that you took away as a man from that experience, and what are some of the things you appreciated most?
Yeah. So, obviously you do some growing up, and I guess no matter where you are, 18 to 23. I was 18 when I left, 23 when I came home. So you do a lot of growing up there, and I certainly did. And, I learned a lot about people. One of the regrets is, I was in Taiwan 4 years. I could have learned Mandarin. I could kick myself for not doing that. A couple guys did. By the time I left, I could understand a conversation between two Chinese people, for the most part. Even today, if I hear somebody speaking Mandarin on the street, I know it's Mandarin. So that is a regret. I'm just trying to think. The land is so beautiful. In fact, I might have told you I'm going back actually in about a month.
Yep.
Actually, a month from today, I'm going
Yeah.
back for the first time in 53 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll be there 3 weeks, and then I'm going to Phuket, Thailand for a week. I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not getting any younger, so what the heck. So anyway,
What a,
yeah,
surreal experience that will be, though, going back, and I would
it
love
will.
to catch up with you when you do return to the
Sure.
States just to hear some of the things you get to experience and things you get to see and maybe some of the memories it brings back. a lot of time has passed, since you were there, but I'm sure there's going to be some feelings that arise that were, maybe what you experienced when you were there, which will be pretty interesting.
Yeah, a couple of my smart aleck buddies wanted to know if I was gonna go try to track down my old girlfriends. I said, "No, I don't think so. I don't think
that
that's gonna
that would
happen."
that would be a movie.
Oh, that would be well, so, a number of people who have read this book have suggested that there's a series in this or maybe a movie, which I mean, it's come from more than one person, so, yeah, it makes me feel good, and I actually did when I got my book got reviewed in the Taipei Times last summer, and that prompted a couple podcasters to reach out, a YouTube guy to reach out, and also a guy that was over here in the US, and he worked for somebody like Discovery or something, but he's got his own production company over in Taipei, and we're gonna meet up, I hope, and I'm gonna talk to him about it. I mean, he reached out to me, originally, and he's kicking around some ideas. Now, whether that happens, I don't know, but that would be kind of cool. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
argue with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great again, we've seen a lot of shows and movies that talk about this or one story or another, but it never there's always something new I mean, your book,
Yeah,
again, being a military policeman over there, I don't really know what the responsibilities of that look like, and I haven't seen a lot about that during that time. So your book to me is very unique in that it's yours. It's your story. There's things
it
in
is.
there that haven't been shared before. And so I could certainly see the potential there to do more with it, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah, the guy at the Taipei Times, when he was talking to me about the review and asked me, and I hadn't researched it, but both he and I did. No other person has written a book about Americans' times at that time and during the Cold War from that region. I'm the only person right now so far that's done that. So that's
Wow.
kind of cool too. And
Yeah.
be honest, that's what's prompted me because people kept saying, "Wow, these stories are crazy. Why don't you
Yeah.
write about it?" So that's fine. It took a while. I'm a little
Yeah.
slow sometimes, but I get there.
Yeah. Did you grow up journaling or writing at all? Like, did you write while you were there at all, or is this something you did later in life?
Yeah, I really didn't. I mean, I was a big reader. I've
Mhm.
always been a big reader, but the first thing I ever got published was I was still in the service. I was back in Northern California and, getting, kind of getting radicalized a little, I guess. I was tired of the military. I think tired of that, cut your hair, blah, blah, blah. So I wrote a little piece that was signed by a bunch of guys and they put it in stars and stripes. And that would have probably been, let's see, I got out 74. That would have been right 70, yeah, probably late 73, early 74. I have it somewhere, but no, I never hit me. How I got there was I started out at a couple of I stayed in the Bay Area when I got out of the service, and I went to a couple junior colleges. And the second one I went to, I was getting ready to go to San Francisco State as a junior. And I didn't know what I wanted, so I had a couple ideas, but I took a test. I don't know what the technical name is, but it's like an interest test. It
Mhm.
compares what your answers are to people successful in their careers. And journalist was one, musician, journalist, and so I thought, okay. So that's how I got to it. And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, TC, I've got one more question for you because I ask everybody this who comes on the podcast. And you said you've been a big reader your whole life. And I would like to know what's a book or two that has meant a lot to you personally or professionally. And if people like myself or say, hey, TC, I need to pick up another book. What's a good book recommendation that you'd give me?
Yeah. That first part of your question is hard, because I've listened to your podcast and I was thinking, what book, and God, there's so many, So I thought,
It's a hard question.
well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it depends on the. Part of my life I'm in.
Exactly.
I mean, I
Yeah.
was going, 20 years ago, I went through a bad period and I started looking into guys like, Wayne Dyer or Michael Singer and people like that, it's more of a, learning about not being unhappy if things don't go the way you want 'em to go. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that exactly right, but you know what I mean. But I
Yeah.
can tell you, like, some of my favorite authors are Elmore Leonard. Elmore Leonard is, he's gone now, but man, every book he wrote is awesome. Don Winslow. I've got all of Don Winslow's books. Carl Hyacin. Every book of Carl Hyacин's is hilarious. So
Yeah.
I would recommend those to anybody as authors.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's and I know I think about it all the time. When I ask that question, I kind of rerun it
Yeah,
in
do
my
you have
head at
one?
different points.
What's
Yeah,
yours?
well, it's kinda like you when you're at different points of the year even or
Mhm.
different at times in your life. A few years ago, I would have probably answered it differently. I have my 2 go-to books now that I recommend to a lot of people. One of them is Question Behind the Question,
Oh,
and, QBQ, and it's just one that talks about being a servant leader, and I read it every year to start the year, just kinda to
good for you.
tune my head in to be a good, peer, husband,
Sure.
friend, and then I'm a big sports fan, and so I always find it fascinating on how the best of the best athletes and coaches get to where they're at, and I love more of the mindset part of it, and the Tiger Woods book that came out a few years ago, it was really interesting to me because it just talked about more about how his dad was and how he grew up. And it kind of like talks about why Tiger may think the way he thinks or talks the way he
Yeah.
talks and just how that killer instinct came about on the golf course. And so it really just gave me more insight to why he is the way he is, why he was so good on the golf course, why he had trouble off the golf course in certain areas of his life, which also kind of stemmed from him seeing how his dad was. And so it was just really,
Yeah.
but I've done the same thing. I've read about like Tom Brady and Peyton
Oh,
Manning and
yeah.
John Wooden. And so I just love the way they think and just it's interesting to me how that all comes together. So
Yeah,
those
well,
are
it
some books
opens
that I
doors, right? That you don't think of. That's the
yeah.
beauty of reading for me anyway. I mean, not only
Yeah.
entertaining, but I read both. I read fiction and nonfiction. So,
Yeah, same here. Because I take something from it all.
yeah.
I love learning new things, experiencing new things, and so, yeah, that's the whole point of Books for Guys, and before I let you go, TC, I definitely wanna publicly thank you for your support of being a part of Books for Guys and
Oh, of
helping
course.
helping our mission, and we're very proud to have your book spotlighted on the website and highly recommend everyone picking it up and reading it. And hopefully at some point too, maybe we'll see it on Netflix or on the big screen
That's
somewhere.
right.
Who knows? Possibilities are endless.
All my friends tell me they have to get somebody better looking to play me. I don't argue with that. I don't know. I don't have any
Hey,
candidates, but I'll think on it.
yeah. Hey, with all this, AI stuff, yeah, I'm
Oh,
sure they could touch you up and
jeez.
make you look real good.
Yeah, no kidding. That's kind of scary.
Well, TC, this has been, an honor and a pleasure, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Ditto. Thank you very much. I love what you're doing, getting books to people who might not read. I mean, I think that's important stuff. Really is.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Mm.
TC.
Yeah, thank you.